So yeah, for folks out there, my name is Peter Sprygada, currently the VP of Product Management here at Itential. But none of that matters. Really, more importantly, I've been doing network automation since 2012. So, Brad?
Yeah, hey, my name's Brad Thornton. I'm a lead architect with Red Hat Ansible. I focus in the networking space. Prior to Red Hat, I was a network engineer and architect for 18 years. So I think I've been doing this since before I lost my hair, which has been and the beard turned gray. So
hopefully it wasn't because you were doing automation.
No. No, I think it was getting the buy-in for automation, right? Like I think
exactly.
That was the challenge.
But that's funny, but it's really kind of a great point. I mean, you think about, in our topic today is really just kind of talk about the state of automation, where it's been, where it is, where it's going, kind of concept. But, I think that you immediately touch on a great point about, just the challenges, never mind the technology for just a minute, the challenges getting an organization to make that leap of faith, right, towards network automation.
Yeah, because it can't be just one member of the team, right? Like when you go down that journey, it is as important to crack the code on the technology of automation, but to get the entire team on board. And I think the latter is the bigger challenge.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And then you do start to get them on board, and then you run into probably the next big hurdle, and it really, I think, is where the journey starts, at least as it relates to network automation, right? And it's this idea that, how do I just simply take what I do today and use software to make it happen? And I don't, I think that's kind of where a lot of people started.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And it's in fact where I started. I was simply looking to speed up my own job, right? How can I do my own job faster with automation and more consistency? And then once you get started there, it's like you show your teammate and you've got 2, 3, 4 people, and then you start collaborating on the techniques and the code and the data. And I think that's when you really make the transformation from siloed automation for an individual to enterprise automation.
Yeah, it's which is in and of itself is a huge step. Just getting to that point, I think, and I think about, in the early days of what we were doing in automation, and certainly there was a lot of false starts, right? I mean, I can remember the days of, we were going to take, the puppets of the world, and that was going to be our network automation. We were going to adapt it to the network, and oh gosh, boy, were we naive about what it was really going to take to get buy-in and really address it from an enterprise standpoint.
You and I have talked a lot about this, and the unicorn of the unified data model that can cross-configure every different vendor platform appliance with a single, right? The promise of open config, which you may disagree with me. I don't think we've realized, and it has a lot to do with all the exceptions for the models and everything else that are out there.
Yeah, open config, for all of its wonder and all of its perceived promise, and I'm not saying there's not a place for it, but I look at it as, it's SNMP version 10 or what, it's just the next coming of SNMP here, right? I mean, I mean, you remember it, I remember it, back to even when I managed networks, right? It was it was SNMP was going to solve this problem. We were going to have this unified data model around ASN1, and what happened is everyone shoved everything into a private web, and yeah. I fear the same thing happening for things like open config.
You mentioned SNMP, and it's really interesting is I have actually heard SNMP come up more in conversation over the past 6 months than I had the 5 years before that. I'll tell you where it is. It's edge, right? It's IoT devices on the edge that are so simple. Not that SNMP is simple at all. That was the promise. But there's actually, I think, people out there with sensors and IoT devices that are simply just capable of doing SNMP, and they want to pull back some operational state. I don't know where, I don't know if it's a trend or if it's just an anomaly, but it's funny that you bring up SNMP.
Well, it makes me wonder though. Okay, so you start to see SNMP showing up again. We're seeing this pendulum swing around network automation, right? We kind of started, over here with really heavy code-based solutions. And then we kind of had this big swing into everything being kind of framework driven, and then things swing back into code, and now we bring SNMP back. But really kind of, I'm curious, for kind of from your perspective, where do you see the technology today? I mean, we talked a little bit about the past, and yeah, it was right. It was all about node by node, still task-based CLI automation. But where are we really at today in your opinion?
I think we've cracked the code on configuration management, right? I think we've crossed that line. There's a number of different ways to do it. You can do it with framework X. You can do it with Python library. You can do a low-code approach over here. People are understanding source of truth, right? Like golden config. I think we've cracked the mechanics of configuration management. Whether you're doing full config or subset config or resource configuration, I think there's enough of us that have worked on that piece is done. So I think that's a really good place to be. I think what's happening is more and more conversation about the data that drives configuration. Right. So we talk about the automation pipeline. You've got data coming in from the left from one or more sources of truth, and you need to transform that data, aggregate it. It's a classic ETL issue, right? Like you need to pull the data and transform it, make use of it in whatever your automation platform is, and then you need to cast it back. You have to transform it almost a second time to cast it back to whatever mechanism, whatever way you're pushing your config, whether it's transforming into CLI or transforming into a Yang payload for NestConf or RESTConf, or, depending on how you're pushing it, or even just a pure API call. But I think that's where a lot of the work and the focus needs to be. Now, that's not the state of today, but I think we need to get better at data transformation on both sides, so we can have a reasonably normalized data model in the middle on our automation platform, but then have the flexibility of transforming it to device A on Tuesday and device B on Wednesday when you need to.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you touch on here, and I think it's a really big point, because it's an area that I've personally seen a lot of teams and individuals kind of get hung up here, and it's this idea that before I can really do automation, I've got to deal with my data. And while I think that there are snippets of that are true, I think that somehow that has morphed into this idea that I can't do automation until I have a single ubiquitous source of truth that has all of my data normalized, and therefore I can't even talk about automation until I deal with that problem first. And I think that's, at least from my perspective, that feels very much like the wrong approach, because I think you can start using automation today with today's tools. To your point, right? Config automation, we know how to do it. It may not be perfect, it may not be everything, but you don't need to make this huge investment in data science in order to take advantage of network automation today.
No, and I think two good points you bring up there. One, I think when you're getting started, it's hard to differentiate the data from the configuration, right? They appear to be the same thing, and I think that comes with time. As you start templating your configuration, the templates really break that config into its two natural pieces. One is the vendor-specific implementation or configuration, and then the data. So you're starting to really, and I think we slowly do this going at it backwards. We're slowly harvesting the data out of our configurations and seeing the difference between the two. And to your point about source of truth, if a team had only one source of truth, I would wonder if they ended up in the right place, because chances are there are portions of the configuration and the network that are actually driven by peer teams and peer groups within the organization. Right. So I don't think the network team should own all of the data. I think they should go to the source of that data. And I think that's your point about multiple sources of truth. It could be a CMDB or facilities database, or it could be the virtualization team may have a subset of the data. And that's what this is what we were talking about earlier. You need to pull all of that in, aggregate it, and mesh it to a point where you can create the configuration to get the configuration change that you're looking to do.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. Which and I don't want certainly anyone walking away from listening to us talk thinking, they don't think you need a source of truth. No, that's not it at all. I think it's just
lots of them.
Exactly, lots of them. Get the data where the data makes sense, instead of we've seen this a million times before in many different applications, not even specific to network, about the dangers of shadow data or cache data that proliferates into the organization and what
Yep.
that means to IT, right? So I think that's always something to be cognizant of.
Yeah, I think literally the source of truth is go find the owner of the data. And
I
the
love
owner
that.
is
That is great.
right? I mean, that's what we're talking about, but you're not the owner in all cases, meaning the operator, the engineer doing the configuration.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. The other interesting thing, kind of, you think about kind of where we're at today is this idea around tooling, and there is, boy, there's everything out there, right? Everything from my Perl script that I've had running against my iOS device, using Telnet from way back in the day, and expect scripts to all the way up to the complete opposite end of the spectrum. Where we're talking about products and solutions and platforms that require you to know no coding at all, and everything in between. I'm curious kind of what's your thoughts around, kind of where we at today in this tooling journey. And then, I ultimately want to parlay that into, where do we kind of see it going?
I think this is the maturity level thing. I think what we see after we moved from individual automation to team automation, then you've got enterprise automation. Enterprise automation, you've got repeatable automation, right? So it may be an operator driving a change from a trouble ticket, an incident, or a request, however it originated. That's one place. I tend to think of those as kind of an ad hoc change, right? You're not pulling in the source of truth to influence configuration. It was an email or a request or something. So I think that's part of the natural progression. I think over time, and actually, I think very few enterprises have gotten here, is you start thinking about why configuration management is necessary. What triggered the change, right? Was there a change in the source of truth? Well, how do you detect that and influence configuration downstream? Was there an incident? Do you need to steer traffic? It's another reason for a configuration change. It may not be in the source of truth, but operationally there's a requirement to do it. So how do you detect that? And I think where we're headed is event-driven automation. You see this in some very simple pipelines where configuration management is driven from actions from your SCM, right? And that's really event-driven automation, because the event was the source of truth change, but that's only a subset of the reasons to make a configuration change. Tooling-wise, I don't want to get into tooling. Too many tools. I think what we can do is, for the developer of automation, provide better tools. And I think that's been the case for a long time. I think that will continue to be the case, whether that's low code, no code, or friendly Python libraries if you need to go that direction. And I think we're seeing it on both fronts, right? You've got the drag and drop workflow builder on the left, and then you've got the yes, I see the need to do data transformation in Python, but I want a library that is very easy to use and straightforward, right? I don't need to understand the attributes of the parent class 4 levels deep to do it.
Yeah.
So we need to avoid that situation. So maybe that's the low code and the no code on the left. Yes, Ansible Navigator. Somebody mentioned Ansible Navigator. Developer tooling. I can't promote it. I said we wouldn't talk, but yeah, thank you for that mention.
Well, but I think it's, it is a great point, is that, there is, again, kind of going back to this idea that there is no one thing that solves the world's problems, right? There is no one ubiquitous way to do this. And you and I've talked a lot about this in many different forums and many different discussions, but I'll bring it up here again, right? It's all comes down to the same thing: use the right tool for the right job. Right? That's what it comes down to. There's no such thing as, this is my tool and I'm going to shove this tool into every problem that I need to go solve.
Yep. And it's use the right tool for the right team, because a different team may want to go deeper into the code versus another team, right? Yeah. And that's the build versus buy theory that has been around forever. And it's really it's largely skill set, it's interest, it's how deep does the team want to go, right? Like, you can do some great things with pure Python or Go or Rust or whatever you want, but there's operational overhead in maintaining that automation solution. From a hiring perspective, that gets more challenging, because you're really looking for a skill set which is knowledgeable, skilled network engineer and developer at the same time. And the challenge there is, you over-index on either one of those things, you're not addressing what we're all really trying to do is deliver business value, right? We don't make changes for the sake of making a configuration change. Well, maybe there was an audit or something and we had to, but you know, we go to work every day as network engineers to help drive the business forward.
Agreed.
Right? So maybe we shouldn't be writing all the code. I don't know.
I completely agree. I mean, it's you know, if one positive has come out of, you know, some of this, and I mean, I know that there are network engineers out there. I've talked with them in many different forums, right? That are very fearful of this shift towards software development and code, and that, you know, they almost feel like, you know, I'm losing touch with reality because I'm not even doing networking anymore, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that it's really imperative that the one positive that comes out of this, though, I think, is we're getting back to the days, and you know, I'm an old guy, right? I remember, you know, back in the days when I built networks, and you might be able to relate to this, right? Is that we had to understand everything. It wasn't just the network. We had to understand the application. We may have not built the application or managed the application, but we had to understand how it laid across the network. So we built the network to support the application. And I feel like we drifted away from that for a long time. And I feel like that's automation is starting to help that come back around, because we're starting to get back into that systems mindset and thinking about flows. Right?
You're not suggesting application-specific quality of service configuration. I just want to be clear.
Yeah, fair enough. That is.
I went down that road. That is a dead end. Don't go there.
It is. It absolutely is. It absolutely is. But, you know, I think much in the way that we as network professionals get frustrated with app dev teams because they don't fundamentally understand why a layer 3 fabric is inherently more scalable than a layer 2 fabric. The same has to be true for networking professionals. They have to understand that applications are built in certain ways, and there are certain systems put in place to make those applications function. And our job as network professionals is to continue to work in tandem with our counterparts on the app dev side to build a homogeneous infrastructure. And automation is the tool, you know, I think that we can use to get there.
Right. It's the split application, right? It's the application presentation layer on-prem and taking advantage of the SaaS database service, which we all, you know, that's a struggle. But you're right. I think we need to build. There was a point in time, at least in my career, where I actually tried to influence the application architecture to fit the network, and that was a mistake. Right. That if anybody has been successful, I'd love to hear the story about it. But I think, right, like, because the application teams are trying to do the exact same thing that we talked about earlier, right? They're delivering to business. So we're not going to change. We may be able to influence application architecture based on constraints within the network, but not drive.
Yeah. Could not agree more. So, you know, but you know, and as we kind of round out to the third section here of our talk, and I think this is a great transition, is though, but you know, as we do get into this world where we do think these two do come together and they do need to work together, and I think we all believe that, you know, what does that start to look like as we go forward? You know, what are the things that you're looking at or you're seeing, and you know, kind of from a technology standpoint, and how we can help organizations get there?
Yeah, I think. Like I said earlier, I think we've largely got the mechanics for configuration management, but we don't necessarily always have a way to react to the need for change. I think I think what we're going to see, or at least I hope, more focus on operational state, whether it's telemetry or open config oper state, you know, or parsing show commands. It doesn't really matter how that information is, but really using that data to validate configuration change before and after as entrance criteria, or just from a pure monitoring standpoint, influence necessary configuration change to bring the network back to a healthy state.
Yep.
I think all of the work we've done on the configuration and structured data and taking apart sources of truth, I think we're starting to see more and more work on the operational state side as a reason to drive configuration management.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I mean, we have to be able to take operational state, right, into this funnel and use it to make well-informed configuration decisions. You know, I also think that we're going to see the rise, and I think we're already seeing the rise, right, of starting to see more organizations start to embrace more of a platform approach to network automation. I think a lot of it in the past has been very individual centric approaches.
Yep.
And I think we're going to see more organizations start to turn to systems and whatever those systems may be, and platforms, and really start that movement towards, I don't want automation to be something I do. It needs to start to become, a way of thinking, a way of approaching how I'm going to manage my network. Mether that's to your point of pulling in operational data and using that to make informed config decisions, or starting to build out, and leverage some of the methodologies that really kind of come out of the software world to build, more automated end-to-end flows in terms of how we actually process a lot of these changes. We need to move to a world that is, that allows us to move faster, because and I wrote a blog recently about this. I think that organizations are continue to be infiltrated by cloud services, right? And I've seen that. I think you've seen that a bit, right? Where cloud services are, they're not waiting for networking to get its act together. They'll just step right around networking, and they'll find other ways to go solve their problem. And so I think it's incumbent upon all of us to build solutions and deliver functionality that allows organizations to move at that same speed, as their app dev teams are moving as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a network. It's just on somebody else's hardware.
Yeah, agreed. So it is, right? I mean, it really is. You touched on one thing I'd love to kind of just parse into a little bit deeper, and that is kind of this idea you touched on earlier about this idea of a pipeline, and you talked to I knew you and I've talked a lot about this in the past.
Yeah.
For those that may be in tenants, that's a bit of a new term. Let's touch on that a little bit and kind of how we see that playing out going forward.
Yeah. So when I talk about the pipeline, it's a CI pipeline, and it starts with an event on the left, typically a change that needs to be made, a change in the source of truth, a data configuration change, which triggers events through the automation platform, which triggers generation of new configuration, which triggers interaction with downstream network devices, right? So we really start managing our network at the far left, at the source of truth, once the pipeline is in place. So classically, you would build a configuration locally and cut and paste it to the device, right? Like back in your lab, that's how I still do it, because I like the memories of it.
Yep.
But I think as we mature and as network automation matures and we get further down this maturity path, we really start looking at how do we create the event, how do we manage the data, and let the pipeline actually push the configuration and roll back if necessary and do the health checks to assert that the network is in a healthy state at the end, right?
Yep.
So it's really all of the things that you used to do manually, but now you're starting to codify, not necessarily in code, but build out a pipeline to take care of a majority of that. And then this is where trust comes in. You asked me earlier, where are we? I said I think we cracked the code on configuration. I should have also mentioned, I think we've reached a point where people trust network automation, and that's a big deal.
That's a
right?
huge step.
And that's a huge step, right? Because now we can focus on not digging into the automation itself. You build it as part of the pipeline. You can now trust it, right? You let it drive configuration management for you. Now that we have the trust in place, we can focus on the other ends of the spectrum, other pieces of the pipeline, whether that's data transformation, configuration management, operational state, health.
Yeah, I absolutely, completely agree. And I think that this kind of goes to that idea of starting to build systems and platforms that provide that capability. Whether you're building it yourself out of open source tooling, or you're building as a combination of open source and closed source, or you go completely closed source with it. I think having that platform that really allows you to conceptually take the idea that you've got about, I'm starting at point A, I need to end at point Z. How do I get there? Having the ability to build that all along the way, as opposed to each piece being bespoke, built bespoke, and then I'm trying to figure out how to tie it together after the fact, right? And I think that's I could not agree more about that's where we're going. So as we kind of round this out, I'd love to know kind of what is your 1, 2, 3 things that you're excited about as we go forward here over the next year or so. I know I dropped that one on the spot on you, but good stuff. It's good stuff.
Wow. I wasn't ready for that question. I'll answer it differently. I will answer it top of mind. Operational state is top of mind for me, right? Trying to normalize operational state across diverse platforms, and understand or build or find the language that lets you answer the question, is it healthy?
Yep.
And that could be from a ton of inflowing telemetry data where you're standing under the tsunami and you can't deal with it all, or operational state information from two different platforms that's radically different.
Yep.
Right. The DSL, the language of answering the question, is it healthy? That's top of mind for me. gRPC, got a little bit going on there, so that's some activity. What else? There's two. You go. What's top of mind?
Yeah, no, I think for me, it's really, for me, it's a couple of things. One, first and foremost is I think we've reached kind of that point. We've got to start to bring network automation to the masses. It's a scary world to get into right now, and I think we really have to help organizations, that don't have big, massive network teams, or that don't have network folks who want to go down that software path. We really need to bring solutions that kind of, as I say, bring network automation to the masses. However that happens, right? I think that's going to be really key. And then I think the other thing, and I kind of alluded to it already, and I think we both are absolutely in agreement in that, is we've got to start to bring the whole thing together. It cannot be bespoke solution. It's got to really kind of take the whole thing. It's no longer okay to change out pieces of my tooling infrastructure every time I turn around because I've released a new version, right? There's an entry point to this pipeline that you talk about, whether that's a ticketing system, or it's a command that you run on the CLI, or it's something you click from a custom web GUI. There's an ingress point and there's an egress point, and everything in between. And we need systems that are really focused on bringing network automation, but also helping to tie all of that together at the end of the day.
Right, because it's not just about the configuration anymore.
That's right. It's not.
It's the pipeline. It's how do your tools that you're working on and your focus, how do they fit into the pipeline? Right. Not because your tool is great, or you may be satisfied with what you're working on is great, but the enterprise, the customer, is only going to be successful if it fits into the pipeline. So you've got to know how the data is coming in and how it's going out the other side. Totally
yes, agree. Absolutely. So, well, with that, I think we've started to hit the witching hour here. But first and foremost, I want to thank everyone who took time to join us. I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope you got a lot out of it. I'm excited about where we're going. I also want to thank you, Brad. It's been a pleasure, as it always is, being able to sit down and talk with you and pick your brains.
I was flattered you reached out. Thank you very much.
So thank you, and thanks to everyone. If you have specific questions, you didn't get a chance to ask it here or whatnot, feel free to reach out to me I'm on Twitter at @privateip, and I'll be more than happy to chat with you.
Code the network, cider block on GitHub. Yeah, I'm available.
Fantastic. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.